Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We call this thing Baltimore Positive. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on Wednesday. We will be at Coco's Pub, finally back after their vacation. I get some coconut shrimp. Look forward to that. We will have Ron Cassie and Max Weiss from Baltimore Magazine coming out to I don't know. Do I get an award? Do I get like a plaque or something? I'm not sure for best reinvention here at Baltimore Positive. We're looking forward to that. That's Wednesday, and we're certainly looking forward to real football in a couple of weeks. But between now and then, we got fake football, and we have real problems on the offensive line. Luke Jones joins us now. The injury to Danny Pinter has sort of changed the center position here. I think it's going to create a little bit of murkiness for us the next 3 or 4 weeks as we get into this thing. Welcome in, man. I know it's a break for you to talk football. It's so joyous because talking fake football because baseball has brought us so much joy here this week.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the only major headline from a couple days of joint practices with Minnesota was a not so good one. And obviously the torn patellar tendon suffered by Danny Pinter. The Ravens haven't fully confirmed that he's going to miss the rest of the season, but I don't see a scenario. I mean, that's a season-ending kind of injury, unless it's a partial tear or there's another option that I would not be aware of. The expectation is he's done for the year. And look, I mean, it makes the center position murky. I mean, it was already murky. I think, let's be clear, a month ago, we all assumed when they signed Ethan Posick, he was going to be the starting center. So if that still ends up being the case, then losing Danny Pinter's, this isn't losing Tyler Linderbaum if that had happened the last couple training camps, right? We don't know if Danny Pinter was going to be able to do the job at a high level. But I think the way that the summer was stacking up, Pinter had been running with the ones. Posick has been running with the threes. We saw that in the preseason opener. He didn't play till the fourth quarter. For me, I was really, really starting to wonder if this was a scenario where, with Posick coming back from the Achilles tear last December, I was really wondering if we were going to see a scenario where he ended up starting the year on IR with the thought that, hey, continue to get healthier, continue to ramp back up, and we'll see if the target is, I don't know, say October, right? And I mean, he's practiced all summer. It's not as though he hasn't been on the field. It's not as though he's not taking any reps. It's just kind of been striking that he wasn't working with the ones. He wasn't getting run with the ones. So made me feel like where he is right now, ability wise, because of where he is health wise, that you were going to see Pinter start the season as the starting center. And then if Posick got into a place where he was better, feeling better physically, and you see how Pinter does, right? I could have seen that being the scenario to start the year. Now you remove Pinter from that equation, and the question becomes, all right, can you accelerate things for Ethan Posick, or do we start to look at Javon Gwynn, who, by the way, for what it's worth, and I'm not saying that this publication is the gospel when it comes to evaluating offensive line, but Pro Football Focus really, really gave high marks for Javon Gwynn playing center, and he got the bulk of the snaps there. I mean, Pinter played a couple series, and then Gwynn came in and played the rest of the first half and into the fourth quarter at center. So my question would be, do they pivot to Ethan Posick entirely and they just try to accelerate whatever timeline he potentially had in terms of being ready to play for week one? Or do they take a nice long look at Javon Gwynn, who, by the way, was with Dwayne Ledford, their offensive line coach, was with him in Atlanta the last couple years. I don't think it's a coincidence that he followed Dwayne Ledford to Baltimore, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Dwayne Ledford wanted him to follow him to Baltimore. He's played next to no football, right? Even, he was a late round pick back in 2023. I think what was a seventh round pick. Had a career at South Carolina that was nondescript, didn't scream like future NFL starter or anything like that, and has barely played in the NFL. He played a total of, I think it was 13 snaps or 11 snaps. Sorry, I actually overestimated a little bit, but he played 11 offensive snaps last year for Atlanta. I mean, he was just a special teams depth game day lineman for them. but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how these preseason games look. It'll be interesting to see how the next couple weeks look. Is it a case where those two guys are sharing first team snaps, first team reps, they're alternating days? Or do they say, look, we're not going to accelerate this thing with Ethan Posick. This was, whether we broadcast it to the media or not, this was meant to be an October through January signing rather than a week one signing. And we're going to go with the younger guy because Posick still needs to get himself in a better place to get back to pre-injury form. I don't know, but anytime you remove an option from an equation like this where there is so much uncertainty and the positive spin is to say you have competition, the negative is to say, well, we don't really have a guy that we feel great about. But you remove Pinter from that equation, who had gotten the bulk of the work with the ones even going back to the spring. It's not ideal. That's obvious. I mean, they clearly had at least some confidence level in Danny Pinter that it looked like he had a really good chance to be the guy, at least in week one. So it's not great, right? I mean, it's not ideal. I mean, you were already had question marks about that position even before Danny Pinter gets hurt. Now you just remove him from the equation entirely. So now it's Jovan Gwynn, Ethan Posick, and I suppose, Jesse Minter did say this in Minnesota on Thursday that Corey Bullock will get some more run at center, because he's mostly worked at guard. But for me, Corey Bullock being the one guy that's the incumbent here was the incumbent backup. The fact that he hasn't gotten much, hasn't gotten any run with the first team or even the second team as a center, that tells me he's not a serious candidate for that job. So I think for me, it's going to be all eyes on what does Jovan Gwynn look like in game 2 against the Vikings Saturday, and what does Ethan Posick look like, and do they start to accelerate their ramp up of him to see, hey, can he be ready week 1? Can he be ready week 2? Or are you in a position where you're having to go with a guy with no experience at all in the NFL, basically, and you're kind of hoping for the best, and you're hoping that Dwayne Ledford's able to coach him up. So it's not great, and that's why
By the way, I
it's
love
that
the
much.
name Dwayne Ledford. He sounds like a member to Leonard Skinner.
Yeah,
I love that name.
I mean,
So.
he's if you've for anyone who's paid attention to their offseason, I mean, beyond the head coach and the coordinators, no position coach has been talked about more than Dwayne Ledford as their O-line coach. And he was highly thought of in Atlanta. He was thought of as being a difference maker. And boy, he can really prove his worth as an offensive line coach if they can get competent play at center, if they can get average play at center, because you look at this thing on paper when it's a guy that has 11 career snaps under his belt, a former 7th round pick who barely played at all his first 3 seasons in the NFL, or talking about someone who's coming off of a December Achilles injury. And if I'm calling a spade, Ethan Posick wasn't exactly having the best season in Cleveland last year, even before the injury. So those are your options. Dwayne Ledford, work your magic, right? And again, Danny Pinter being removed from that equation, considering how much run he was getting, you got the sense that there was at least a pretty good chance he was going to be their week 1 center. And obviously that's not the case anymore.
Here's Luke Jones. We're going to be watching fake football this weekend. So are we on the Jacoby Lane thing? Are we on the Vengaone? I mean, like watching this Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock,
Yeah.
by the way, noon in Minnesota, kind of weird. So if you're around in the middle of the day Saturday, turn the golf off and put this on. But for 5 minutes, I don't know what to say. They've practiced. We've got an injured center, which is the worst situation. The Zay Flowers and Lamar Jacksons will all have their gold chains hanging around their neck and be talking to whatever employee that Sashi Brown puts in front of them to talk to them on the field. I'm not watching this for entertainment. I'm watching it to figure out, all right, what are they trying to do here this weekend in Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, center is paramount now. I mean, I think Jovan Gwynn's going to get the start, and then we'll see how much Posick plays, when he plays, all of that. But beyond that, and obviously that's a massive, massive question mark for them, even more so now. But beyond that, you just want to see how the young guys look. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if Jacoby Lane even needs to play as much as he did in week 1, right? I mean, I'm not saying you just rest him outright, but at the same time, he made a few plays. He did exactly what he's been doing in training camp all year. Do you really need to force him playing a whole lot more with Snoop Huntley or Joe Fagnano, right? I mean, like, I don't know how much of that you need to see. Same with Venga Ioane. I mean, I think it's going to be similar for him. I think he gets a couple series and then you pull him, right? And I'm guessing Ioane, I'm guessing him playing Saturday that'll be it for him in the preseason. I would think, assuming he plays like he did in the first one, I would think you don't even want to risk putting him out there for the final preseason game. So you're looking at depth pieces. I'll give you a name that I'm hoping to see a little bit more out of than what we saw in the first game. We've talked about Venga Ioane, their first round pick. We've talked about Jacoby Lane, their third round pick, right? Elijah Surratt did some good things, fumble aside in that game against Philadelphia. I'll tell you someone that I want to see flash a little bit more in this game. I'd like to see Zion Young, their second round pick, stand out a little bit more. I didn't think he was awful in the first game. Let me be very clear about that. But for a second round pick where they were as excited as they were to get him, the idea that, the perception that they had a first round grade on him. And look, I mean, we hear this from teams all the time, right? Every team loves their draft picks initially. I mean, it's why they drafted them. But I'd like to see a little more of a flash from him from a pass rushing standpoint when he's going up against backups and third teamers. He showed a good motor. I mean, he ran down, there was a play he ran down up and made a tackle, but I want to see him disrupt the pocket a little more, especially if you're going up against backups. I say this all the time. These preseason games, forget about the final score, even forget about the volume stats. I want to see individual matchups, right? If you have young players that you're counting on to do real things for you this season, your rookie draft picks or your second round guy or second year guys that you're looking to make a jump, third year guys that need to make a jump, kind of now or never for them. You want to see them stand out in this setting. If Minnesota, and well, I don't know exactly what the Vikings plans are going to be off the top of my head, but assuming they handle it similarly to Philadelphia, you want to see these guys stand out, right? If it's backups against backups, if you have good backups, you want your backups to really stand out and look really good. And that's why it was so encouraging to see Jacoby Lane do what he did. That's why it was so encouraging to see Ioane do what he did. So, but for me, Zion Young's kind of the guy, and I'll even throw Mike Green in there as well. Mike Green probably was, I'd say, at least a relative surprise that he played last Saturday night when you kind of look at the scope of everyone that they rested. I think Mike Green was one of the more prominent players that they actually played against the Eagles. So if they do that again, I want to see Mike Green flash a little bit more as well, right? I mean, for all the talk of Trey Hendrickson and even Nnamdi Madubuike, you're still looking for another edge to make a jump, right? And Tavius Robinson's that run stopping guy that they're going to move around. Yes, he showed a little more pass rushing juice last year in his third NFL season, but the guy you're really looking for this year to make a jump is Mike Green. You're looking for him to, especially knowing that Trey Hendrickson's going to get as much attention on the other side as he will. You want to see Mike Green eat as a result, right? You want to see him have a 8-sack season on the other side. If Trey Hendrickson has 13 sacks or something like that, you want Mike Green to have have an 8-sack season,
because he's complimentary thing.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
And in the way that way that you viewed, various pass rushers the Ravens had over the years when you're talking about the opposite side of Michael McCrary or Peter Boulware or Terrell Suggs for years and years and years. There are other guys that line up on the opposite side that should benefit because Suggs is going to be double teamed and they were going to have a chipper over on that side. Well, unless they're in max protect, they're not going to be able to do that on the other side. So that's where Mike Green, you say, you got to win one-on-one, right? I mean, it's that simple. So I want to see a little bit from those guys, a little bit more from those guys. You could throw Adisa Isaac in there too if you want, right? I mean, third-year guy, former third-round pick, has been hurt his first 2 years. Can he start showing some juice, right? So I think that would probably be a big one for me. I think the young edge rushers, I want to see them flash a little bit more than what we saw, at least a little bit more than what we saw against Philadelphia. I mean, for as great as the defense played, and look, Philadelphia's quarterbacks got the ball out so quickly. I mean, the time to throw was negligible. I mean, they were getting rid of the ball so quickly. They didn't really even give the Ravens a chance to get their pass rush home. But, I want to see a little bit more there, right? I mean, if we're looking for relative things I want to see in the preseason, other than just not getting any more guys hurt, right? I mean, you already lost the center. The last thing you want is to have another interior offensive lineman go down. So, but beyond that, I mean, it's just kind of the who impresses, like who stands out, who doesn't stand out, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and try to blow smoke about how incredibly excited I am to watch the second preseason game. To tell you how excited I am, Nestor, my plan, for anyone listening, my plan is I'm going to watch the first half of the preseason game, and then I'm going to head to the ballpark for Rays, Orioles, and Pete Alonso bobblehead night. I mean, that kind of tells you how I'm viewing this thing. And obviously I'll
By the way,
monitor
on behalf of all the listeners, I'm very disappointed you're skipping Vanilla Ice. That's all I'm going to say.
when is that? When is
That's
Vanilla
Friday
Ice?
night. Yeah.
Is that Friday night? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
We don't do radio on Saturday. You're excused.
Yeah. So I wanted to have one night to catch my breath, but yeah, but yeah, other than that, I mean, I think we go back to the joint practices. I wasn't there, obviously, but the overall perception of the joint practices was the defense was fantastic, and the offense still remains a little bit of a work in progress.
Minnesota doesn't have a quarterback, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kyler Murray, is he going to be better than J.J. McCarthy? Yeah, I think so, but like that's a pretty low bar, right? I mean, it's kind of like talking about the center spot right now for the Ravens. Like, okay, like Danny Pinter might have been the week one guy, but like, what's the bar? Like, is that going to be good enough? I mean, it's certainly not going to be Tyler Linderbaum. So, but yeah, I mean, the overall perception of people that were out at the Vikings complex and watching that was that the Ravens defense looked great. And the offense was a little more up and down, and that's
were
what we've
fans
seen.
there. By the way, I didn't see any of it. No?
As far as I know, there were. Yeah, I mean,
it was
like,
open,
right? It was open. So, but that's kind of what we've seen over the course of camp, right? The defense has looked really, really good, and the offense has been a little more of a work in progress. I wouldn't say the offense has been bad. Like that would be, I don't think Lamar Jackson's had a bad training camp. But it looks like they're doing things differently on offense than they have in the past. I mean, it's definitely a different offense. Way more under center, way more play action passing under center. They are not deploying a fullback with any kind of regularity. If they do, it's just a tight end that motions there and lines.
Though, right? But I mean,
no,
that would have been the first thing we would have said is that, the Ricard era might be over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they didn't even try to re-sign Ricard, right?
Well, that's a remnant of Greg Roman, honestly.
Exactly. And I mean, even Todd Monken early on, Todd Monken was kind of there privately. I know there was skepticism, but they loved Patrick Ricard, but clearly this Declan Doyle offense, which is somewhere in between the Sean Payton offense and the Ben Johnson offense. But I think what's been very evident, and this even reflected in the preseason game, even though we didn't see the starters out there, so they're going to be under center way more. I mean, the days of Lamar Jackson being in shotgun 96% of the time, I think that's over. Unless the Ravens happen to be down 3 touchdowns in the second half.
It also speaks to your center having to snap the ball differently. We don't even know who the hell the center is, like, right?
Yeah,
that's the shotgun, playing that game as it creates one more. I mean, look, I told you all along, I thought that this offense with the sleight of hand and with the mesh point, it would be a lot sloppier than it's been over the body of work. I mean, it's a compliment to Lamar and everybody he's handed the ball off to, but in a general sense.
Yeah. And I don't think that's remotely a driving force for why they're doing it, but it feels like a little bit more of a feature, right? That might be hopeful. You hope that's one less thing on the plate of whoever's lining up at center. But yeah, I think Lamar has said this. Zay Flowers has said this. Some of the O-linemen have said this. I mean, this is not the Todd Monken offense, which the Todd Monken offense, as different as it was from the Greg Roman offense, still maintained some connective tissue in the way that they did things. By all accounts, this is a completely different offense now. And to be clear, that doesn't mean, they're going to become this insane pass-happy offense. They know they still have Derrick Henry. They know that Lamar Jackson, at least the presence of Lamar, even just speaking in terms of as a decoy, is still a centripetal force for your running game. And the threat of Lamar to run, even if he's not going to run up nearly as much as he did 6, 7 years ago. So, like that's not what we're talking about here, but just the way it looks, right? What they're asking these guys to do. They've talked about it. It's a more sophisticated across the board kind of offense than they've been running in the certainly going back to the Greg Roman era, right? I mean, as great as Lamar was even back then, they weren't they weren't running a whole lot of true pass sets and things of that nature. Whereas I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see a more well-rounded, sophisticated, wide open, multiple kind of offense than you've seen in past years. And I think that's a great thing long term. But when you talk about having a lot of new parts, whether we're talking about the interior O line or the fact that they have, other than Mark Andrews, a brand new tight end room, some changes, kind of across the board. Yeah, I could see. I'm not saying this offense will stink to start the year. I don't far from that, but could I see this offense having some, needing to iron out some kinks and having some hiccups here and there? Yeah, I think that's why we've talked about the fact that you look at the schedule on paper coming out of the gate. It's a far cry from what it was last year. Let's just put it that way, right? Last year, I mean, that was the crucible early on, and that was one of the reasons why they started 1-5. Like they weren't as good, and they played a lot of good teams early on. So, yeah, so I think that's where things are, still a work in progress. We're not going to learn anything on Saturday in that regard because you're barely going to see any starters. But just looking at it from a big 30,000 foot look, that's kind of where they are right now. I think the defense is ready to play now, other than Matabike needing to continue to ramp up here over the next few weeks. But I think beyond that, the defense has looked really good, and the offense still has some work to do. But that said, I still think the overall vision, the overall upside of this offense, assuming their offensive line can hold up, which, I mean, that's a big question. That's a big if. If that can happen, then I think this team has a chance to be excellent on offense. And I think Lamar Jackson has a chance to have another MVP caliber year because that's kind of been his MO when he's in the first year in a new system. He did it with Monken. He did it with Greg Roman. I'm not going to sit here and say he can't do it with Declan Doyle, but they do have some boxes that they need to check here, not just over these next few weeks, but early in the season to really take off as an offense.
All right, and cuts don't happen till after the third game against Washington, right?
A week from the 30th, so a week from 2 days.
You looking at anything that might be weird around the edges of the roster in regard to some drafted players either this year where they're just like, this guy's not cutting it, or somebody we've heard of, some Tavius Robin, some guy that, may be around, but like, hey, somebody's earning a job. I don't know. And I don't know enough about Minter and certainly where DaCosta is on wanting to quit on certain guys, like if Mark Andrews can't, as an example. And the other part of this is if they're going to cut veteran players, let's say like a Mark Andrews, or, it's not going to be Roquan Smith or anybody like that, but finding other players out on the wire there, this isn't a complete roster just yet, right? I mean, especially not at the center position, maybe some depth at secondary, that sort of thing where they would be sniffing. I know Ozzie would be sniffing this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say they're not a complete roster, but everything's in pencil, right? I mean, you're not going to sit here and say we definitively have the 53 guys that are going to be on our week one roster. I mean, that can always be TBD because you never know what could happen. They're not. Mark Andrews is in no danger when they just gave him a contract extension, 8 months ago, 9 months ago. But I think for me, I look at you always look at guys in the final year of their rookie deal. Someone like Andrew Voorhees, for example, who's going to be a backup. They actually just redid his deal because he had one of the proven performance escalators, got later round draft picks that play a lot their first couple years in the league. They get a bump in pay. And that sounds great on the surface, right? That sounds great to the player. But then what happens is if that player is a backup, that then puts them in danger of not making the team. So I could see someone like Voorhees being traded because he's He's very clearly not one of their two best guards, and he might not be one of their three best guards at this point in time. But I don't think anyone would be stunned by that. For me, I kind of look at the defensive line as a really interesting group right now, Nestor,
Do you think they
because
would deal out of the offensive line when they don't have the depth
yeah,
to
because I
begin
don't
with?
think Andrew Voorhees isn't good. I
They
mean,
just want to play him, right? Got it.
he was a starter last year, and
Right.
he's not he hasn't gotten first team reps all spring and summer. I mean, John Simpson and Benga are going to be the
Doesn't
guys.
mean that you don't want him to play if Simpson gets hurt.
Fair enough, but if you don't like him at $2 million, and if some team wants to give you some team is desperate and they see, hey, that guy started last year, he must be good. Like, think about it. We didn't even bring it up because he's not the Ravens' problem anymore. But the Giants and John Harbaugh just traded Daniel Falele to Jacksonville for a 6th-round pick. I mean, if someone wants to give you a 5th or 6th-round pick for Andrew Voorhees, they would absolutely do it. But your point's well taken. But even so, like, we're not talking about, no one would be stunned by that, right? I mean, no one would be all that surprised by that. I think where things are interesting from a roster standpoint for me, beyond talking about, okay, could you add another veteran edge rusher? Could you add another outside corner to the mix? Just talking in terms of who they have on their current roster. I think the D line's really interesting because you have a Nnamdi Madubuike who still has some boxes to check in terms of ramping up. He still has not done any hitting, to the point where if this goes on much longer, like the next week or so, like if he's still not working his way into team drills and things like that, then I start to ask, is he going to be ready for week 1? So, but I'll give them another week, right? I'll give them another week for that. But so you have him, even if he is ready to go week 1, what's his workload going to look like? You have Calais Campbell, who's going to turn 40 years old before week 1. What's his workload going to look like at this stage of his career? You have Travis Jones, who should be completely fine, but he's coming off of an offseason pec surgery and did not play at the very beginning of training camp. Now, I think he'll be fine, but you still want to be mindful of that. You have Broderick Washington, who kind of sort of is in the same category as Andrew Voorhees, a guy that is making some real money, but he's a depth piece and he's a little bit older than some of a couple of the D linemen you just drafted the last year or two. Is he a guy that hypothetically you could trade? Or do you want to have that depth because of the uncertainty with Madubuike, because Calais Campbell's another year older? You've got Aeneas Peebles, you've got Rayshon Benny, you've got CJ Okoye, who was on the 53-man roster last year. There's not room for all those guys. And I didn't even name the name that I'm going to bring up, who I think could be interesting. It's John Jenkins, who had a really nice season for the Ravens on a defensive line that was just completely decimated by injuries. They signed him to a contract extension at the end of last year, but it was only for the 2026 season. I wonder if John Jenkins could be a sleeper candidate to kind of be the Brent Urban. And what I mean by that is, anyone who's paid attention to Final Cuts the last 4 or 5 years, Brent Urban would almost every year be cut. He'd be released as one of the final cuts, but because you're a vested veteran, you're not subject to waivers. And then basically it's a handshake agreement. The Ravens release you, and then they bring you back a few days later or the next week or whatever. I could see them maybe doing something like that with John Jenkins, who was a starter for the Ravens last year. So I think the D line for me that's kind of the interesting group beyond just looking at certain positions and saying, oh, well, do they have enough depth at inside linebacker? Do they have enough depth amongst their outside corners? But D line is kind of this position group where I think they have a lot of inventory, like a lot of names of interest, but how many of those guys are really players? How many of those guys are legit members of your rotation? How many of those guys can you fit? And even in the case of, say, like a Peebles or a Rayshon Benny, if they're not on the 53-man roster, what's your degree of confidence of getting them to the practice squad and continuing their development? So that's a group I'm very much interested to watch. Kind of like how I was talking about the edge rushers a few minutes ago. That's a group where I want to see some of those younger guys, like, you're in a battle to make a roster spot. Go make some plays. Go be disruptive. Go dominate the Vikings backup offensive linemen, right? That's what you're looking for from that group. So, I don't think this team has an abundance of intriguing roster questions. I just don't. I think there are questions about the players that some of the players that will be on the roster, but I don't think there's I don't think this is a team that has 12 roster spots up for grabs right now. I think it's maybe two or three at the most, and that's kind of the way it always is. I mean, fans and media, I think we have a perception that the bubble's way bigger than it actually is. But those positions that I named, like go show out, as the kids would say, right? Go play well. Go dominate some Vikings backups. Go stand out. Go leave no doubt about the fact that you belong on this football team. In the way that I think Keon Martin, for example, has really taken a major stride or two to saying, I think he's going to be on this football team. And I'm not sure I would have said that 3 weeks ago, but he's been their, other than Hamilton, he's been their best nickel. He has lined up a lot with the ones when they go into dime package. And oh, yeah, he was the best defensive player on the field for the Ravens last Saturday night by probably by a pretty significant margin. So there's a guy that was an undrafted player last year, made the team, mainly did special teams. And now he's looking like someone who might be their next Tavon Young, a guy that he's undersized, but really plays tough from the nickel and probably not going to be in the nickel package too often this year. But when they go dime, I could see him being on the field. So you're looking for a couple more players to make that kind of a statement on Saturday. Whether we see that or not, who knows? I'm not saying it's going to be the most captivating entertainment, but that's what Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver and Declan Doyle and Eric DeCosta are looking at this point in time in terms of filling out the back end of the roster. Who are the depth guys that are actually showing it, not just guys that we're talking about in the offseason and then, not really doing a whole lot when they get out there for these preseason games.
Well, we'll be doing a lot once it's all over with. We'll have some real football around here. Luke will be monitoring all things Minnesota and the Ravens at 1 o'clock on Saturday. We'll be back on Monday to discuss all of this. And I don't know whether the Orioles are going to have a real season by then. We're getting into sort of that little tenderloin period here where our 28th anniversary is this month. We're going to celebrate on the 28th, which is next Friday, with 28 musical memories this year. That is my my kid's anniversary was like their 10th anniversary steel or something like that. Whatever those years go, it's our 28th anniversary. I think it's rock and roll this year, so that's what we're going to do, especially because Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson are around. He is Luke. You can find him at Baltimore. Luke, you can find me anywhere Baltimore Positive is served. I am Ness at Baltimore Positive. Also, we'll be giving away Ravens scratch-offs on Wednesday at Coco's when we bring the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by our partners at Maryland Lottery. We'll have the Ravens scratch-offs with the Kiss Face Bird as well as our friends at GBMC and the aforementioned, and I'm wearing my orange Farnan and Dermer gear here. They are the comfort guys. You can find them at 410-367-7777. And Zach came out. We had Dennis Kolatzis this week. We had Damie Hahn, Billy Cole, all over at Fishmonger's Daughter, one of the great new restaurants in town as part of our Fadley's family. I did not have a crab cake, though. I had this delicious fish sandwich. It was a hake sandwich with and I like a fish sandwich with tartar sauce on it. That's the only time I eat tartar sauce. It's just absolutely delicious, and the sides are phenomenal out there. These great potatoes. I'm going to send Luke out there sometime with his mom and his sister and kids going off to school here. I got friends dropping their kids off at college. Whew, we might even get some rock and roll in here but before next week, especially if the Orioles are going to go into the tank and the football team's going to play more fake football. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. I'm not taking vacation yet, but I have not touched the beach, and it's almost Labor Day. We're Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.